welcome to Second Breakfast. There, that sound. Well, before we get the show started, I always like to do the same thing every day. I always like to remind everyone what I do first thing every day, and that is to thank my higher power, to thank my higher power for my life, for my health, and for my wealth. And by wealth, I mean my spiritual wealth. And then I pray for others. I pray for those that I love and those that I do not. And then I ask for help, especially help to love those that I do not. And I ask help to get through the day, just today. And then I finish off with my other prayers, Lord's Prayer, Serenity Prayer. And that gets me set and ready for the day. And it looks like a wonderful day today. The sun is out. Here in Quinte West, the weather is going to get warm enough to actually start melting the snow a bit for a just a fall spring. And other than that, we will get straight into the show. So right after the intro, we will be right back. If I can get this set up properly. There we go. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to the Second Breakfast, the stream of consciousness that fills part of the gap between the No Answer Period and Blazing Cat for Fridays, which was just yesterday, which I do every Friday morning at 9 instead of Second Breakfast. We're streaming on three platforms, Rumble, X, and YouTube, so please give us a like, thumbs up, follow, and share, and subscribe most of all. The chat is up across all three platforms, so please feel free to ask anything. Comments drive the algorithm when I'm not driving it down, and if you're watching this on repeat, leave a comment, you will get an answer, at least a thumbs up. Anyway, I really appreciate all my followers. We're getting a few extra subscribers. Please, if you're not subscribed, it helps to drive the channel. And I've been working on these channels since April of last year, and I will not be stopping because I do have a message to get out. But today, that message will not be touched upon. We'll be covering some different things. It's been a busy morning for me, as you can see. I usually bake bread every other morning, part of a ritual. If you like the bread recipe, it's over on my gardening, cooking, and canning channel, which if you're on my YouTube or Rumble channel, there'll be a link down below. In fact, the way Rumble works is just a master account with several channels, whereas YouTube, it's separate channels. And of course, at the bottom of Occam's Razor channel, you'll see the link to my other channel, which is where you will find the easy bread recipe. So easy. There's no kneading. That's right. You don't need to knead the bread. Outstanding. So looking at my site here, and we just had the last story we have is the one on the Liberals continuing to triple down on EV funding. That is funding EVs from the United States when apparently these tax incentives is coming out of our pockets as Canadian taxpayers, supposed to be for Canadian companies. Well, when the Liberals do this, it's never really for Canadians, and you'll see what's going on there. And of course, my other channels there, Rumble, YouTube. Oh, sorry, wrong program. All right. So, oh yeah, there is one thing I wanted to show first. Do I have that up or did I lose it? No, it's right here. Yesterday on Blazing Cat for Fridays, he had a rather well, funny video. So let's just watch this funny video first to get our hearts pumping with some laughter.
Brought for us today.
It's my father's potato masher. It was gifted to him on his 5th birthday.
It's been in the family for years.
Yes, every Sunday we would make sausage and mash together, and since his passing, in many ways it's come to symbolise our relationship.
Okay. So this is more than just a potato masher for you, Diane.
It is.
Well, let's find out the value and origin of this priceless family heirloom. You nervous?
Excited.
Okay. Okay, I've got some good news and some very, very bad news.
I hope it's not too bad because we sucked a lot of mash off that every Sunday.
You're going to regret that, the pair of you. The good news is this is very valuable to some truly evil people. The bad news is this isn't actually a potato masher. It's a butt plug. We traced its origin and it belonged to none other than Heinrich Himmler.
It's a Nazi.
I'm aware.
One of the bad ones.
Don't actually want to touch this anymore. It's pretty rank. How does that make you feel, Diane?
Every bit of joy. It's just turned to black.
Anyway, that's all we have time for. Tune in next week where we're joined by Avery, who wants to find out the value and origin of her great-grandfather's favourite ghost costume.
Oh, it's still funny the second time around. Oh my God, it brings a tear to my eye. All right. So, oh yeah, before we get to that, let's listen to Michael Barrett in committee, which is in keeping with the thumbnail for today, about how the Liberals seem to be working further and further into darkness. Now, if anybody remembers Justin Trudeau coming out saying that the Liberal government would be the most transparent government in history. Of course, the opposite has occurred, as everything the Liberals do is actually opposite world. So let's listen to Michael.
425. So there's a lot of people who say, I would say rightly say, that PCO did not do what the law requires.
So that would be the Privy Council office, right? That's the PCO, Privy Council office. That's where the ruling government, through their PCO, can issue rules, laws, policies without Parliament being involved and make changes. So the PCO are the ones that decided to add over 1,000 more weapons to their gun registry or gun banning list that they needed to confiscate from Canadian citizens. So first they passed legislation that bans a couple guns, and then the PCO right said, "Oh, let's add these extra 1,400 guns to that list." They do kind of like stuff like that. Like recently with Carney coming out and saying, "Yes, well, let's hide all the vaccine harm records for 15 years." Yeah, that came out of the PCO.
If you could just very quickly, in 30 seconds or less, tell me what is driving this problem at PCO.
I do not know that I can answer that in 30 seconds. However, I will endeavor to answer it for you. The number of complaints is driven by a number of factors, including the complexity of the files and the number of access information complaints and requests that we are getting. We are currently receiving a large number of requests, and our requests have grown dramatically over the last few years, doubling over the last few years. We have also noted the complexity of the requests and the pages requested is much longer than before. When it comes to the complaints themselves, it is worth noting that our complaints are largely amongst 3 individual requesters. 78% of our complaints are from 3 requesters, and those have grown in the last few years, whereas complaints from other requesters other than those 3 have actually dropped by 50% over the last few years.
Has PCO consistently followed the law with respect to, and without exception, with respect to access to information?
PCO's access to information team makes every effort to release documents in the timelines outlined in the Act and to seek extensions when
So,
required.
that's not a yes. And, you mentioned that PCO is not going to reduce in size the number of people who deal with ATIPs. But by how many people has PCO added to the department over the last 10 years?
We are currently in the process of reducing the department.
With respect, sir, the question is, over the last 10 years, by a percentage or total number, how much larger was PCO? How much did it grow over the 10-year period?
I do not have those numbers with me, as we're here to talk about access to information, and we did not bring financial figures.
Well, you brought up staffing levels. So if you're bringing up staffing levels, as it relates to your ability or inability to appropriately manage requests to access information, I think it's reasonable for us to quantify how many people you've had at your disposal and working in that department and what their priorities have been. We have seen requests or instruction now for the hurried deletion of things like instant messages, so Teams messages. And we've seen that some departments, they have individuals who are using encrypted messaging services like Signal or WhatsApp. And over the last few years, there have been many instances where access to information from as demanded by parliamentary committees haven't been met, including by PCO. And so this has a damaging effect on public trust. Would our requests aren't for decades-old records, so these are things that could be searched digitally. We're not talking about files that are in boxes in the basement. So, do you require a rethink on how you're processing this? Because to date, the process doesn't appear to be working. Even when parliamentary committees are saying we need this information, it's not that it's secret; it's just that it's not forthcoming. So, should you be dealing with this, in a reverse chronological order and addressing things as they, and resolving them as they come in, instead of, I think famously having told some requesters that they won't get their the information for 95 years, which would exceed the natural life of anyone old enough to make a request?
Well, I'll comment on a few of the things that you raised. So in terms of resources dedicated to the access to information function, which is different than the size of the department, we have grown that team. We currently have 33 full-time equivalent employees in that team, and so that has grown, and that will continue to grow as we try to address the backlog. We are looking at how we can do things differently. We have taken steps to try to be more transparent and to be more efficient. An example of that, in the past, if someone asked a question about how much did a Prime Minister's trip cost, they might get 500 pages of accounting information that they have to make sense of. Today, we actually offer to not just give them that if they want it, but to actually give them a very comprehensive spreadsheet breaking down all of the expenses by item. So we will actually create documents if it's in the interest of transparency and efficiency and giving the requester what they would like. And if the requester is amenable to that, we find that to be a very effective approach.
What's the one tool that you don't have today that would most improve PCO's ability to comply with the commissioner's orders and to comply with information or document requests from parliamentary committees?
One of the things that I know that the Treasury Board Secretariat and others are looking at is the use of artificial intelligence. If we were to have systems that had a better ability to auto-redact or to auto-sort documents, that would help us go through. I mentioned we have 2 million documents in our active files. If we could pare that down, if we could eliminate duplication very quickly, that would certainly help our analysts to spend their time on the actual redactions to make sure that we're doing things properly and we're giving Canadians information faster.
Before we continue,
Well, they talk a big game, but they still don't provide the information when it's asked. And even when they do provide the information, it's mostly redacted. Now here's a post by J.D. Haltigan, PhD. Canada reflects a nation that has lost its way. Unbridled liberalism has reached its terminal endpoint. There is no cultural authority. Unconstrained postmodernism is the natural end state of liberalism. Leftism has normalized a rejection of normality, pure nihilism. And here's Michel from LA, although that he's reposting, stating, hanging in almost every public school across Canada, we have a serious problem. Now, if you're not familiar with what parts are what parts in the alphabet flag, um, well, this part right here is the I guess it represents the T, right, for the transitioning. So all the grooming of your children sexually in school, as opposed to just teaching them writing, reading, and arithmetic. No, they are being subjected to cultural Marxist ideology every day, along with this symbolism. I mean, the only flags that should be hanging up in schools should be the flags of that nation, that province, that municipality, and any other flags out there for historical reasons of education, right? You want to have flags up there of other nations. Hey, look, here's a flag of this nation, that nation. As long as there's, proper representation. But flying flags of ideological conformance, that's pretty scary. And we've been saying it for years. They are indoctrinating the children in school into an ideology that is not compatible with what we grew up with what we were taught in school as the older generation. Even the generation that came after me, they weren't taught this BS, although the climate change cult stuff started to come in about that time. But now it's these are just they're not teaching kids. I mean, I'm pretty sure if you went through and looked at the math scores, probably wouldn't be very good, but they could probably tell you if they're a victim or an oppressor. And of course, we can see that this is infiltrated throughout the services. They were bringing this into the Canadian Armed Forces during the COVIDity stupidity because they knew at that time it was the perfect time. They were purging the military of anyone with any morals and ethics who wouldn't stand for being injected with a fraudulent medication that had no risk benefit analysis. There was no informed consent, but still they were pushing it. So those of us who joined for a reason to fight for our country for moral and ethical reasons that decided to sign on that dotted line. We're ready to lay down our lives for our country, but many of us were serving veterans being turned into second-class citizens for refusing their BS. So at the same time, they said, "Oh, perfect. We're gonna expunge the military of all these people who are still able to think for themselves yet follow orders, and we will bring in our cultural Marxist ideology at the same time." And they did it. That was at the time where what's his face, doofus down south there. I can't breathe. The one who was overdosing on fentanyl, and they were using a proper knee hold that the officer was trained in. And then, of course, this criminal died on the streets, and it turned into riots as usual down south. But here they were talking to us about this at work amongst the senior staff. The CEO bringing us into a meeting to talk about this incident. And we're like, what the hell is going on? And of course, we're all sitting at separate tables, because of the COVIDity stupidity. And then he's like, well, if anybody doesn't mind, you can take your mask off. But the whole point is that for the past 10 years, while working in darkness, these liberals have been slowly trying to destroy every fabric of our society and replacing it with a new Marxist ideology. And that's why you end up with, well, with a spokesperson like this in the RCMP. And it's no surprise, right? Because in the Canadian Armed Forces, you also have had the person who had been pushing the diversity, equity, inclusion program throughout the military. She was the one that ended up becoming chief of defense staff after they miraculously sidelined every other general of merit who was in her way with false accusations of sexual improprieties. That each of those cases were dropped before actually came to courts martial. That's the kind of BS that the liberals have been doing in the background. So again, let's listen to this prime example of, well, a complete loss of schmickness.
Well, radicalization in general quite often will show by people isolating themselves and changing their behavior, like changing what they're saying on a subject, like becoming more extremist. Like, and if someone you know was very believed in equal gender rights, but all of a sudden are leaning towards like traditional values, and that might be a sign that they're becoming more extremist.
And that is how they do it. That's how they did it in all the communist countries as well, framing traditional values as dangerous. I mean, it went to the extreme in Cambodia where they thought that anyone who was wearing glasses was smart, so they killed them. Can't have smart people around. That's how the Khmer Rouge operated. I mean, there are extremes, but in the end, socialism only builds itself on a mountain of skulls and can only really push their narrative either through propaganda like this or through violence. And here you have someone in a federal police uniform telling us that traditional family values are dangerous. Now, there was some backpedaling slightly after that, but it's too late. It's too late. You've just exposed yourself that this is the ideology that the senior staff are pushing in federal employment, not just in the RCMP, but especially in the Canadian Armed Forces, which has always been a petri dish of experimentation because Canadian Armed Forces members can't do anything about what they're being abused or exposed to because their only venue is to GTFO. And unless you're on the 30-30 plan, which is like 30 seconds to piss me off, 30 days to get out, they can hold you for 6 months, right? Abuse you more for 6 more months and then finally release you. Here's a post from Stacy. Shouldn't the amount of people needing benefits to buy groceries go down instead of up in a thriving economy 3 years on? She states. This is what liberals call elbows up winning. And then they all clap like seals. And we've seen them clap like seals if you watch my no answer period, where we cover the question period, preceded by 45 minutes of covering stuff like this. Justin Trudeau here. There's an old post from here. Hundreds of dollars in support for 11 million people across the country. That's what we're delivering with the new grocery rebate. And that's what I spoke about with people in Val d'Or today. I didn't realize that I saw this post, but I forgot to, I didn't even see this part here of Val d'Or. I actually spent 4 years of my life in Val d'Or, from the age of 12 to 16, going to high school there. And that was when the first referendum occurred. That's when the Péquistes got elected to control the provincial government there. And that's when they passed Bill 101. And that was the first time I was made a second-class citizen, was living in northern Quebec. Yeah. As someone who primarily went to English school but is bilingual. But yeah, treated like a second-class citizen. Come back from summer vacation, and the big brass letters that we had on the side of our high school that said St. Joseph's High School. There were only two English high schools in all of Val d'Or. There was the Catholic one and the Protestant one. Our Catholic one had 300 students in it in the high school portion because it was both an elementary and senior high school built in this huge U shape. And then down the road was the Protestant one, and they had 75 students. And then the French Polyvalent, as they call theirs, that was 3,000 students or something. Yeah. But of course, with this Bill 101 that they had passed, um, if you're if your parents went to school in English school in Quebec, then you can go to English school as a student. Now, of course, anyone that already had been going to English school in Quebec was already grandfathered in, so they weren't moving out. But I remember we had these two brothers. Their father worked for the mines, and they got moved into Val d'Or, and they were given allowed to go to English school, high school, for 1 year. They're completely English, and in that 1 year, they had to learn français. They had to learn French. And because the next year they would not be allowed to continue their education in English high school, they had to go to the Polyvalent. Well, then that one year they never learned French enough to actually continue in Polyvalent. That kind of destroyed their lives in a way for that short period that I knew them at the time. But that was, my experience right there. And then seeing these huge letters that we had on the side of the building had been ripped out after the summer. Huge holes left in the side of the building, anchor points, ripped out and had been replaced by a sign half the size, white wooden sign with black letters painted on it saying École Saint Joseph, just to remind us that, everything had to be in French. Unless, of course, you own the majority of your business outside of the province, which would have been, I think it was 60%. And of course, I think a half dozen big businesses moved out of Quebec at that time because they weren't going to be subjected to that kind of stuff. But that was a long time ago. Yeah, way back then. And I guess things have not gotten better in Val-d'Or. I've heard a lot of stories about that town when I was teaching up at CIFSATE, Canadian Forces School of Aerospace Technology and Engineering in Borden, Canadian Forces Base Borden, which is where 16 Wing occupies. That's the training facility. One of the other instructors, he said that his brother that lived up in Val-d'Or would be woken up at night to find a bunch of local natives partying in his backyard. Things had gotten so bad with the last big flooding of an area in phase 3 of the James Bay project that a lot of people got moved into the Val-d'Or environs without any proper support or security. So huge gangs, now that mind you, this is almost 20 years ago, huge gangs of natives would be going downtown to the point where they would just go in restaurants, order stuff and not pay and go out. And local restaurants would have to put signs in the window saying literally, like, no natives allowed. Now, this is recently in Canada because of the complete mismanagement of what was happening up in that northern area. And I guess if you went more than 50 meters into the bush line off the side of the road, you were faced with just massive clear cutting. So destroying the local environment as well. Yeah, it's a sad thing. It was really cold growing up there. And of course, as a teenager in high school at the time, that these are formidable years. But we moved to Ontario when I was 16. My parents were being treated like second-class citizens because although they were fully bilingual, Uh, and even though dad was born in northern Quebec, but didn't grow up in Quebec, because they grew up in northern Ontario, they were not considered Quebecois. And they had enough of it. And we moved, we left. Now, let's get back to the story here. So he goes on. So Mark Carney says, we created a new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit to help Canadians cover the cost of everyday expenses. Starting this year, more than 12 million people will benefit. Oh, we've gone from 1 million to 12 million. But it's the same messaging. It's the same DS. 3 years later, it's just buying food stamps. But what makes it even worse this time is that they're still borrowing money to give us these food stamps. It's failure on repeat. And yet Canadians keep re-electing the same abusive failure. Now, speaking of failure, Enbridge won't pursue risky Alberta pipeline project, CEO says. I don't think investors or the infrastructure companies should be taking on the risk of development in jurisdictions that have historically created challenges, they say. And these are not challenges being created by independence movements. These are challenges being created by the red tape. The challenges that have completely fuckered all the pipeline development in Canada. I mean, the last great one that we had, the the company was building it on their own, and the Liberals buggered it up so much they had to purchase it and then finish it themselves. And then they patted themselves in the back for building that pipeline when the cost ballooned. Taxpayers had to pay for that error when industry was going to build it themselves. But the Liberals had to come in and bugger it all up. Now, as a result, of course, that sends clear messaging. And when you develop energy sectors, it doesn't happen in 18 months. It doesn't happen in a couple of years. You're talking about a long-term development plan. It can take 10 to 20 years to get a proper refining facility built. Now imagine all the other ancillary infrastructure that needs to be created for that in the first place. The Liberals have put Canada so far back with their 10 years of shutting everything down, shutting all industry down, punishing businesses with their taxes and red tape, that we don't know. We don't know if Canada will recover. I can tell you one thing. If the next election comes by and Canadian citizens are not smart enough not to vote them back in again, that's it. It's done. Stick a fork in it. I mean, it's already bad enough. So many people have left the country and they're not coming back. But if the Liberals come in again, that's it. The exodus will be complete. The only people left behind will be all the same brainwashed morons who love the socialism and will slowly watch Canada descend into being nothing more than basically just an economic failure, just like Greece, just a big social failure. Here's a post by Christina Maria. The EU has voted on whether only biological women can become pregnant. That's right. You read that right. The EU has voted on whether only biological women can become pregnant. Now, what's even worse is 200 voted in favor of saying, yes, only women can be women. Only women can have babies. But now 233 voted against it. Now, we're talking about cultural Marxism. That little transgender flag hanging in the schools. The long cultural Marxist march of indoctrination has been going on for so long that you now have 233 seats in this EU Parliament outvoting people with a brain. So we are being governed by an EU that cannot even bring itself to a firm biological reality. And this is why the EU is going to break apart. One of the main reasons, aside from the fact that it's just a big corrupt elite functioning that is getting desperate to hang on to power, which is why they want to ban X in Europe. Just like federal departments and agencies must boycott X as Liberal appointed Alberta senator. When will the Canadian government follow New Brunswick leads? Senator Paul Simon says. Ah, that's right. She asked this question in Parliament. Look at Al, still wearing a mask. The fact she's brain damaged, still wearing a mask, thinking that it's going to protect her. When I can tell you, as a former nuclear biochemical warfare instructor, that mask ain't going to protect you from viruses, dear.
Content and inadequate safeguards. The city of Fredericton has also stopped using X after a city survey showed that fewer and fewer residents were still on the platform. When will the Canadian government follow New Brunswick's lead and stop relying on X for official communications with Canadians?
Senator Moreau.
Now she asked the question, and the senator stood up and he's like, my earpiece wasn't working. Could you ask that again? So she asked it again. And then he basically gave a response. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, but we'll look into it. That's right. That's, it's a couple of generations removed from me. And they're not really on X. But again, whatever reasons are coming out for banning X, it's only because they can only exist in their own echo chamber. X is the largest purveyor of news now on the planet. Outstrips everything else. Immediate breaking news and events instantly available. And it's becoming obvious that every time the government now posts something on there, continually trying to gaslight citizens, citizens come back and post their own words against them, video clips of stuff, their own posts of policy that contradict what they say, and they don't like it. They do not like that scrutiny whatsoever, which is why in New Brunswick, the same people that ban people from being able to walk in Crown land because they might spontaneously combust and cause forest fires, even though, this hasn't been happening. But yeah, so the same province that decided that they were going to be totalitarians and ban people from going into their own crown lands are the first ones to say, oh, that's it. X is evil. It's too much information on there. And as Canadians, The far left, they believe that you're just not smart enough to make your own decision as to what is correct information and as to what is wrong information or malinformation or disinformation or whatever other label they want to give to information. But they believe that only their truth is the real truth. And how do you do that? Well, again, National Post bringing up what we have been trying to point at information forever, but mainstream media is always so far behind these days now, obviously because they're paid by the government. Here's National Post posting again. Division 5, Part 5 amends the Red Tape Reduction Act to, among other things, authorize ministers to grant temporary exemptions from the application of provisions of certain acts of Parliament and instruments with the aim of facilitating the design, modification, or administration of regulatory regimes to encourage innovation, competitiveness, and economic growth. And basically, all that means is that they can exempt themselves from every single law in Canada except the criminal law, but all laws just to get things done. Yeah. Absolute totalitarian authoritarian power except the criminal law to get things done. And of course, they can exempt themselves and their friends and just decide, you know what, I don't need 3 bids for this. I'm just going to give it to my friend. Yes. And there's no oversight. There's nothing in there stopping it from giving it to their friends. The whole reason behind Mark Carney being made the party leader of the Quebec, of the Liberal Party, was to finalize the complete transition of wealth of what is left in Canada over to his corporate cronies. And this is one of the tools that they would use to do it. Now, of course, Ron here, Ron and I believe are about the same age. So Ron, of course, he tells it like it is.
What I really want out of government and big business, I want apologies. I want apologies for 10 years of fuckery. Because when all of a sudden you decide after all these years of telling us, oh, carbon neutral, carbon tax. I mean, no more energy, can't dig a mine, can't do this, can't do that. And then when the shit hits the fan and the economy's in trouble, all of a sudden, yeah, fuck those carbon taxes. Fuck all that stuff. Fuck this climate change stuff. Let's drill, baby, drill. Let's put in pipelines. Let's do this. Let's do that. The fuck? Like, what about the 10 years you told us there was no business case? It was all fuckery. It was all, we had to change our whole lives. You told us that for 10 fucking years. Like, not just federal, all governments. All governments embraced all this bullshit. Could we not have a fucking apology, please? Like, it's, when you chop the tax and say, hey, look at us, we're geniuses, we're cutting the carbon tax. You put in the fucking carbon tax, son of a bitch, okay? Like, just be like, just do the right fucking thing and say you're sorry. We're sorry for years of foolishness. How about the banks who sold on the investment companies who sold all this ESG bullshit funds, all this like carbon neutral, very ethical funds, and they never made any fucking money and the administration fees are through the fucking roof. And now they're having to back off all of it because, well, that shit's out now. Can you just apologize? Can you just say, you know what? I think we were fucking people.
You'd think they would, but they won't, because if they just do one apology, then people are going to ask for apologies for all the other fuckery, especially the big one, COVIDity stupidity, that injured and unalived so many people, and then, of course, ruined so many lives with their mandates, and then drove so many people out of the country. I mean, people were already leaving at an average of 27 to 30 grand per year. Expatriates just leaving Canada before 2015. That number doubled after the Liberals came into power in 2015. And then that number that doubled, well, that number doubled again during the COVIDity stupidity, because people realized these people are half-wits who are only want one thing, and that is complete control over you to do whatever the hell they want. And yeah, just like the so one of the many different ways that the commies, the communists, the Soviets controlled their masses, of course, was through food, right? And they completely buggered up their food system. They ended up believing in something called Lysenkoism. They had this lead scientist, I'm going to increase food production. Yes, well, everyone can remember the Holodomor. All the people who died, well, mostly those were on purpose in Ukraine because they wanted to starve them to death. A lot of people starved to death in socialism and communism because, as usual, the government decides to destroy all the ability of normal people just to do businesses on their own. And then, as communists, they come in and say, we're going to run everything, but they're completely inept and corrupt. So nothing ever gets done properly. There's a lot of waste, and in the end, you don't get a good product. Which is why when they keep just self-applauding themselves in Parliament about, oh, we're building homes. No, fuck. Governments are not supposed to build homes, right? They might have to provide a few homes for a few people in society that need to be taken care of, but they should not be the primary builder, driver of building homes in a society. Because once you get involved in that, that's it. You're toast. You're done. Your government is fully involved and fully running everything. That means your country is kaput. Because governments, once they get involved in running everything, they just don't, historically, they just completely destroy the country over time. You can't show me an example of a country out there where the government has supplanted private industry where it has become a success. There's not one out there. And this is what is happening.
Lifelong rural Canadian who grew up in the riding I represent as a farm girl and who lives at a farm today with my husband where I raise horses. I know I don't need to tell any one of you that grocery prices in Canada today are higher than they've ever been before. And it is unconscionable that 2.2 million Canadians are forced to visit food banks in a single month, and a third of those are children. I know I don't have to tell you that because my constituents are the people who grow the food and ship the food. And they're also, of course, like every single Canadian, they have to buy food for their families and to continue feeding their neighbors and the country. But the reality is, and you need to know this, Prime Minister Mark Carney has actually taken money away from Canada's world-class farmers who feed their neighbors and the world, and instead, he's handing it over to his consultant cronies and for foreign aid handouts. So if you haven't heard, I'm here to tell you, Prime Minister Mark Carney is shutting down 7 agriculture research centres all across Canada. That's going to mean that 650 people are about to lose their jobs when the prices for essentials in Canada are higher than ever before, specifically because of these Liberals. Now, the Alberta Federation of Agriculture reports that Mark Carney made these cuts, shockingly, without meaningful consultation with agricultural producers, which is where you think he'd start, right? And without any clear public plan for the future, which of course every single Canadian who eats deserves to see. Look, the reality is these centres deliver leading innovation on soil management, on disease resistance, and on pest resilience that are all imperative to directly help Canadian farmers put food on Canadians' tables. So when Prime Minister Mark Carney says Canadians should judge him by their grocery prices, Canadians should be forgiven for taking him at his word. But what's important to note is that Dr. Stuart Smith from the University of Saskatchewan has warned already that these cuts will drive food prices even higher for every single Canadian. No one can afford this. But this is the difference between Liberals' words and Liberal reality, through which every single Canadian is struggling. On one hand, Prime Minister Mark Carney says a country that cannot feed itself has few options. We would agree, obviously, right? But on the other, he's cutting agricultural research centres that help grow Canadian food and didn't even talk to the people who grow it. But also, don't forget, Prime Minister Mark Carney campaigned on championing science and research. And he promised during the election to strengthen Canada's science and research community. Now, none of that has actually happened, and every farmer knows that this government and this self-identified European Prime Minister imposes European policies on Canadian farmers and agricultural producers, which often do not at all reflect the reality or the science and the evidence of what Canadian producers and every Canadian agricultural entrepreneur along the supply chain actually needs. And so now, you could see it with your own eyes, instead of funding agriculture research, for which these centers were world renowned. Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing this with your tax dollars. He's giving $19 billion to his consultant cronies. He's giving $8 million for gender-just rice farming in Vietnam, whatever the heck that is. And he's giving $22 million for beans, for women, for empowerment in the Congo. Now, I'm going to suggest that perhaps Canada's role to contribute to women and all people in the Congo would be to help them secure truly human, civil, and democratic rights. But, what do I know? He's sending all your tax dollars to go there for beans and women, and that's going to empower them somehow. Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Liberals, you know as well as I do, they love to look down on, to denigrate, to besmirch Canadians. From their high Ottawa office building to their ivory towers and all their international flights where they all hobnob with those international elites while they get away with things that they all cover up, and they make life more expensive and life more hopeless for all the people who are not like them. They have no clue what farmers need, and they have no clue how badly liberal policies, taxes, bans, prohibitions, mandates, and the imposition of policies and legislation that does not work for Canada and Canadians, that all hurts Canadian agriculture, which underpins the entire economy along with energy. The truth is, Canada's world-class farmers and producers work tirelessly, often in impossible and frankly unimaginable conditions to their urban neighbors, to feed their fellow Canadians and to feed the world with the best food and at the highest standards. Canadian farmers and producers, they just don't need any more liberal interference that gets in their way and harms their ability to make food for our country. I am very proud to represent all of the hardworking farmers, ranchers, farm families, individual entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, and service companies and local agricultural businesses in Lakeland. And I'm proud to be on a Conservative team with Pierre Poilievre that will always fight for Canada's farmers so that they can continue to feed our country, so Canada can have food security, which is the equivalent of national security, so that people can have hope for the future, put foods on their tables.
You would think that, the complete failure at the grocery store by the Liberals would be enough for, I don't know, Liberal voters to perhaps reconsider that they didn't vote for the right person, or in this case, the right party. But watching a recent man on the street Q&A of people out in Halifax by an independent streamer asking them, hey, Poilievre or Carney? 99% of them are all saying Carney. It's because they don't know what's going on. So if you've got people in your family or you got friends around that keep saying, Liberals, yay, I don't know what to tell you. They won't listen to this. There's no way to get through to them. They all think it's all rosebuds and puppies, apparently. They have no idea how far we've fallen from 2015 to today and how much further they're going to take us over the cliff every single day with their policies unless Canadians wake up, the few of them that still remain here in Canada, that still care about this country. But I care, obviously, since I'm doing a stream. And thank you all for showing up. Please like, share, subscribe. We will see you tomorrow morning at for second breakfast at 9 a.m. If I can get my stuff together in time. We'll see you then. If I can get this going. Bye. No, that's not it. Wrong one. Here we go. All right. See you tomorrow.